So like, what's your New Year's resolution?
I'm gonna drop a feature with Pitbull.
Nobody told me this was in the frame.
It's all in vain.
Hello fellow YouTubes, thank you for having me back. A lot has happened since I last had the sudden urge to get my entire life together and finally start creating online content to build a future career in music for myself. The biggest move, of course, was the 4,100 miles to Nashville, Tennessee. So this is my very first video filmed in my brand new, luxurious, very exciting studio space. That is a bed. But hey, look, I've always wanted to sleep in the studio. When I decided to move to Nashville, I knew that I was probably going to end up living the closest to neighbors that I ever have. And indeed, I am in the upstairs of a duplex. So in the decision-making process of what I was going to move to Nashville with me as far as gear goes, the low volume aspect of that was at the forefront of my mind. After all, this city let me in somehow, despite having nothing to offer.
Save me! Pull me out from under.
And I would hate to obstruct anybody else's lives with the torturous sound of my playing. So luckily, back in November, a fellow Maui musician and a friend of mine, Jeff Bowen, was actually leaving for Nashville to work on a record, and he gave me a couple of pieces of gear, one of which was the Avid 11 Rack. I'd never heard of this unit before, and ever since it became an integral part of my setup, whenever any other guitar players ask me what I'm using, I'm usually met with blank stares. But I was blown away with this unit when I first started using it. It has great amp modelers, fantastic effects, and it can be run in so many different configurations. I basically can run it as a pedal board or a standalone unit. So once I started to mess around with it and I liked the sound and I wanted to invest in it, I decided to look into a MIDI controller to essentially turn this into its own standalone rig. So I ended up going with the Roland FC300, which I found used for about $300. The Avid 11 unit goes for about $250 to $350 used. So I've been meaning to make this video for a long time about this possibly being a cheaper alternative to like a Helix. Now, full disclosure, I have no personal hands-on experience with a Line 6 Helix or a Kemper or an AxeFX or Quad Cortex or any of that stuff. In fact, this has been more or less my introduction into the modeling world, and it's kind of an outdated unit, but it fell into my hands, and I think this unit is worth talking about. So without further ado, why don't we hear the frickin' thing? Starting off here, this is my Fender Bassman preset, which has been my go-to for any gigs that I'm using direct modeling. The effects in this unit truly are very high quality. Personally, my absolute favorite effects are the C1 chorus and the tape echo. Next, let's flip it over to my Fender Deluxe Reverb preset and see what we got there. up, I want to do a little bit of a side-by-side comparison. Now, it seems to be commonplace among internet guitar communities for any comparison to be misconstrued as the creator telling the viewer what to think. That's not the case. Nobody thinks that way. That's right, I'm not afraid to say it. I'm against online toxicity. Oh, thank you. You're too kind. Oh, thank you very much. The point of this comparison is more to show the versatility of this unit than it is shooting it out amp versus modeler. So I've made two separate Vox AC30 presets. One running through the 212 Alnico Blue cabinet model, and one running through a Marshall 20-watt Greenback 412. And then I also have here my trusty Vox AC15. This is a 112 Greenback. It costs more to move this amp with me than the total of the rest of the stuff I moved with. So what I'm gonna do is compare the two models with the different speaker cabinets as well as the real amp. It should be noted that you truly can't beat a tube amp. The reason that so many of us guitar players are moving towards modelers is mostly because of the consistency, the convenience, and reliability compared to, old analog tube amps. At this point, so much of the modeling technology that we have access to has gotten good enough to where it's hard to tell the difference between a mic'd tube amp and that same sort of digital simulation of it. But who's to say if they'll ever truly capture the feeling of a tube amp punching your chest, So as long as we've got the real amp up and running, let's hear it. So the Avid has space for 208 presets. It comes loaded with 104 presets and it comes with 2 copies of each. So you can replace the first set with your own and still keep all of the stock presets if you want. So that gives you space to hold 104 of your own presets in the unit at any given time, and you can back them up onto a computer so that you can load what you need at any given time. This does have software that's definitely outdated but still works quite well. Usually I prefer to work just with the front panel of the unit. It's extremely intuitive and works quite nicely. So right now what I've done is I have 3 separate pedalboard presets with slightly different settings to go in front of the amp to play a show with the amp and be able to access, you know, a couple different distortions, a couple different delays. So I have my standard pedalboard, one marked pedalboard F, which stands for fuzz, and one with pedalboard Q, which stands for a quarter note delay rather than the dotted eighth. So as I mentioned earlier, the built-in C1 chorus is one of my absolute favorite things about this unit. It's probably my favorite chorus that I've ever used. Next, I just want to tell you a little bit about how I have this whole setup running. So this is the Roland FC300. I believe they go for around $550 new. I bought this one used for about $300. It's absolutely built like a tank. It's going to do what you need it to do. I just feel like I don't have to worry about it because it's rock solid, you know. I have this set up in a pretty basic manner. I'm just using MIDI CC codes. On the settings page of the Avid 11, it has a list of functions and the corresponding MIDI CC codes. So what you do is you just go on here and you press both parameter buttons and it'll take you to, like, this is pedal 7 CC 36. 36 corresponds with reverb, so that's on my pedal 7. So navigating the unit's very simple once it's all set up. But the gist of it is that I have it set as overdrive, modulation, delay, tap tempo, effects 1, which in the unit has just a variety of effects that you can pick as effects 1 and effects 2. So then what you do to access 6 through 10 on the board is hit this up button, and now it's 6 through 10. So on 6 I have effects 2, and then reverb, and then tuner, and I haven't actually used the last 2 yet. And this is set up as my volume pedal, and this is set up as my wah. My amp controls 1 and 2 are set as back and forth on my presets, which unfortunately I have to run another cable for that. It's a dual male 1/4 inch left and right TS, 2 male TRS that goes into the unit, because unfortunately that's not controllable by MIDI. What I recommend is getting that cable and a MIDI cable that are the same length and turning it into a snake using some Velcro or something, because that would be more convenient. They'd stay together and all that, but I haven't actually gotten around to doing that yet. Next up, here's my Fender Twin preset. One of the cool things about the modeling world, in order to get a real Fender Twin to break up like that, you literally have to go deaf. You will lose your hearing on the spot. I've done it before. What was that? I can't hear you. This way you can get that really gritty yet pleasant Fender overdrive at any volume. I'm just wearing headphones right now because I don't even have studio monitors yet. Now, I've mentioned some of the factory presets that this comes loaded with. While there's a lot of just sort of random stuff, all of it is sort of reasonable, and no doubt that you'll find a few sounds in there that will be worth keeping. Like, one of my favorites that it came with is this 80s clean, and it actually made it onto the latest Timothy Morris Band album, For the Sake of Nothing, on all streaming services now. As I started to mess around with this sound, it became really clear to me why so many guitar players in the 80s were addicted to it. It has this really unique quality of sounding thin but full all at the same time. When I hear it, I instantly think of late 80s Rush. But that's just me. Another one of the cool presets that I found is called Chicken Funk. Chicken Funk. And it just so happens to be extremely close to the sound that I was dialing in for a Daniel Donato song called Justice. If you don't know Daniel Donato, he's an incredible country guitar player that's coming up out of Nashville right now. He's got a couple records out. All of it just blows me away. Incredible guitar player. He writes great songs and he's a great guy. One other sort of gimmicky preset that it comes with is called Secret Journeys. And I've taken a secret journey to some incredible atmospheric textures with this thing. Now I want to take a look at my Matchless DC30 preset. I don't have any personal experience with an actual Matchless amp, so I'm not exactly qualified to speak on this, but I do love the way that I've gotten this preset sounding. It took me quite a while to get my AC30 presets dialed in to where I was liking them, so this actually was sort of my AC30 sound until I got my actual AC30 presets working out. Project that I've undertaken with this particular unit was a U2 tribute show back in March with the Timothy Morris Band. So I absolutely love The Edge. I adore his playing. He's probably in my top 3 favorite guitar players of all time. So this was a labor of love to get all these tones together and put this show on. So I decided to go entirely direct so that I would have everything preset and ready to go with all of the, wild effects and variety of sounds that The Edge uses. So I have in here over 20 presets of just U2 songs. But I've also taken some of the ones that are most likely to be played as covers at a, a sort of standard cover gig and made presets that are for going in front of an amp. One of the things you can do in here is adjust your output volume to each amp that you're sending it to. You can send it to 2 amps at once, by the way. And what I did, since I usually run my amp a little bit dirtier than your usual Edge sound, is that I backed off that output volume, or I'd be pushing the amp the right amount for that particular sound. So now I just want to go over a couple of the U2 presets and then do a little comparison. Next up, I'm going to do Pride in the Name of Love, which is one of my absolute favorite U2 songs. The first one's going to be the amp model, and the second one's going to be my preset to go straight in front of my AC15. It's my personal opinion that if you don't like U2, you're factually wrong. I just want to note that this unit does have some really great Marshall amp models in it, but I haven't spent all that much time dialing them in for myself because I don't really gravitate towards Marshalls yet. The ones that I do have really come alive with a Les Paul, and I don't currently own a Les Paul. But here's a little bit of my JTM 45. The Avid Eleven Rack has a ton of other useful features in it that I haven't covered today because they're not things that I generally use. You got 5 different distortions, and as far as modulation, we have a couple different choruses, vibrato, flanger, a couple of different phasers, and Roto speaker, which I do use quite a lot. Love Peter Frampton. There's 3 different styles of delay in here, but I always gravitate towards the tape echo. I love the saturation and the sort of natural chorus that you get out of it. I just think it's a fantastic delay sound. Lots of other things in here like EQs. I think there's like 32 amp models. There's some bass amp models in here. Stuff that I haven't touched on. I would have covered my bass preset, but I currently don't have a bass. Overall, fantastic unit, but let's get into a couple of drawbacks. There's no way to do any like split parallel signaling. If you wanted to like run 2 amps in parallel, you can't do that. You can only run like 1 distortion at a time. You can run a couple different modulations because of the effects 1 and effects 2. It definitely would be beneficial if you had the option to run another distortion under effects 1 or a double delay or anything like that. Another big thing is the complete lack of pitch-based effects. There's no whammy or harmonizer or anything like that. This is an older unit and the modeling world is changing all the time. So I'm not saying that, oh no, they should have thought about this. If it had a few more features, it would be absolutely perfect, but it's just not quite there. If that's something that's not necessary to you, which I can certainly live without both of those things, then this could be, you know, a really great option for you. But the biggest thing that bothers me about this is that there's no way to use the MIDI switch to control your amp outputs. Either switch between outputs or change the volume that you're sending. The biggest problem with that for me is that I could never find a really good way to run my talk box with this setup without using an additional A/B switch. That to me is probably the biggest drawback. Overall, I think the amp models sound fantastic, the effects are fantastic. Once I started to run this as my pedal board in front of the AC-15, that was the most complimented tone I've ever had. I'm pretty simple when it comes to effects. I use a lot of chorus, delay, I kick on a tube screamer for solo, use a wah pedal here and there. So I wouldn't say that I'm some sort of effects guru. Something like this that's really quite intuitive and simple. It makes sense to me, and I think it would make a lot of sense for a lot of people. I think that's pretty much all I have to say on the Avid 11 Rack. You could probably set up this whole rig for about $600, maybe cheaper, buying both units used. Let me know what you thought about the sounds. Let me know if you have one, because I feel like there's not many people that actually own one of these. And as you probably haven't heard, the Timothy Morris Band's new album, For the Sake of Nothing, is out now. We're extremely proud of this album, and if you want to support what I'm doing in my music or my channel, go check out the album. We're just really proud of it. I think it's the best thing that I've ever been a part of. I played a few riffs from the record throughout the course of the video, so you can go see how those were put to use. I just want to say thank you to YouTube for personally coming and filming me today. I know they have millions of videos to film each day, so it really honors me that their crew was able to come and film me for this on their platform. Shout out to LaCroix, it's nature's water. I don't know what else I have to say except thank you for helping us save the music one video at a time. Bye. I think that's all I need.